There was certainly shock and dismay in the community a few weekends ago as we learnt of mass renovictions happening at Cumberland Gardens. Joining me now to speak about the legal clinic response to this. Certainly they galvanized and organized very quickly to help as many people as possible. So joining me now from the Roy McMurtry Legal Clinic is Executive Director Robert. Welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us to talk about such an important topic. And maybe we could start right from the beginning. Obviously, it was a shock that happened on the weekend. I'm sure first thing Monday morning, things got together quickly for the legal clinic. Talk to me about the response, first of all.
Yes, I mean, we started the response on the weekend, actually. I mean, many of our staff are local and are well connected with the community. So we learned that this mass eviction was going on this Saturday, I think, and we started kind of thinking of ways to respond right away. And then a member of the community in Cumberland Gardens suggested that we could get space at the Legion. So we were able to secure the space quickly. We wanted to meet people quickly so that we could give them legal advice before they decided what they wanted to do. For example, sign that N9 that they were provided, because that would terminate their tenancy. Yeah, so we put it together as quickly as we could, and we were able to turn around pretty quickly with the community's help.
Absolutely. It's certainly heartwarming to see the community galvanize and come together so quickly to try to help. So I know you had around 3 very important points to give to the attendees at that first session. Maybe you could repeat them for us here, the most important points that you wanted to get across.
Yes. So the only person that can evict someone, physically remove someone from a rental unit, is the sheriff. We told people not to sign anything and to get legal advice first. So those were the 3 main points that we wanted to get across, so that people, made an informed decision if they wanted to sign something and didn't feel that they would, get evicted imminently, and had a sense that only the sheriff can actually evict them from a rental unit.
Absolutely, and maybe we can elaborate on that, because certainly it kind of dives into some law things that aren't necessarily layman's terms and things like that. So talk to me a little bit about that in layman's terms, so to speak. At the end of the day, there is an option, to not do anything for some of those residents.
Yes, so when you're renting a place in Ontario, there is a whole legal process for an eviction. For most people, if you qualify under the law. So most tenants, if you're renting directly from a landlord, there's a whole process before you can get evicted. So the first step in that process to get what's called a notice of termination, which is the N13 notice that the residents in Cumberland Garden got. But that's just a piece of paper and a first step in the process. So it gives a termination date by which the person is asked to be out of the rental unit, but the person doesn't actually absolutely need to move out by that day, because nobody's going to be kicking them out unless it's been to what's called a landlord and tenant board. So that's the next step. So someone would receive a notice of hearing for the landlord and tenant board, attend a hearing, which is like a mini trial, and then the person that decides is a member of the tribunal. They're like the judge at the landlord and tenant board. They would render a decision, and then if they decide that the person is evicted, because the person will get a chance to kind of say their side of the story and to test whether or not the reasons for evictions are valid under the law. So if the judge or the member of the tribunal decides that the eviction is valid, then the person can be evicted. And if the person's refusing to leave, then the landlord can go to the sheriff, who's the actual only person that can remove the tenant from the rental unit. And the sheriff usually comes, 1 week, posts a notice, and then comes back the next week on the Friday and changes the locks of the place that the person's renting.
Excellent, and certainly we did hear on the Wednesday night info session that the burden of proof is on this company as well to prove that the renovations are necessary, and as well that they have to do all of the units at once. So maybe elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so under an N13 for repairs, which is the case here, so essentially the landlord wants to evict the tenants because they're saying that they want to do repairs. But there's a narrow test, so what they have to prove is that the repairs are so big that they need a permit from the city, and they need the tenants to be out of the unit for the repairs to be done. And then, I mean, things like whether or not they need to, do all the units at once might be arguments that could be brought up at the tribunal to kind of argue against eviction. But really, the 2 things that the landlord needs to prove is that they need a permit, and that the repairs are so bad that the tenant can't live in the unit while they're doing it. So we're talking about really extensive repairs that are needed to prove that.
Absolutely. So sort of these last two questions kind of falls under one of the options that tenants do have right now, which is to kind of appeal this eviction process.
Yes, or do nothing, essentially. So they can sit tight and do nothing if they want to kind of fight it or appeal it. And then at some point, if the landlord actually wants to pursue the eviction, they need to, send something to the landlord and tenant board and ask for a day at the tribunal, which is all virtual right now. And then there would be a hearing date, and then the tenant gets a chance to kind of prove their side of the story, or kind of make their arguments as to why they should not be evicted. But essentially, they can just sit tight and wait and see if the landlord brings them to the landlord and tenant board, and if so, then they get a chance to kind of defend the eviction. So that's one of the options. And we talked about two options. So the other one is, or one of the other ones is the landlords offering some money to sign with the N9 that they've provided. So the N9 is a notice by the tenants that they want to end the lease on a certain date. And I think they're asking for end of April, and they're offering compensations or some money to sign that N9. So that's another one of the options. And I imagine, well, one way or the other, there's another option that they could decide to leave now if they wanted to come back later. So they need to give a notice before they leave to the landlord saying that they intend to come back to the unit after the renovations are done. So they can do that before the termination date, which is June 30th. They could decide, at some point to leave on 10-day notice or on June 30th. They need to give that notice in advance to the landlord saying, I want to come back when the renovations are done, and then keep updating the landlord with their address. The landlord owes them 3 months of rent. And, theoretically, under the law, the landlord has to kind of call them or reach out to them when the unit is ready and let them move back in at the same rent that they would have been paying before.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that sort of that option too with that payout. And again, at the end of the day, it's up to the tenants to decide how they want to handle this. But certainly the maybe kind of glamour appeal from seeing a number face up isn't necessarily that good in the long run.
No, and everybody has to make kind of a decision for themselves, but we try to provide some information and illustrate how maybe the $4,000 is not that great, in the sense that, if you're paying $900 a month, the landlord would owe you $900 anyways, at $900 times 3, so 3 months of rent, which would be $2,700 one way or the other, right? So that's a difference of $1,300. But then you have to find another place which is going to be much more expensive than what you're renting. So that difference is going to get eaten up pretty quickly. So the $4,000 that looks like a lot of money is probably actually not that much. And, at the town hall last Wednesday, or the Wednesday before last, social services also explained that for those that are recipients of Ontario Works and ODSP, well, that might affect their check for the month that they receive it, because that might be treated as income. So, you may not get any Ontario Works or DSP for the month that you receive that money. So those are things to keep in mind.
Definitely lots to think about for the tenants. And of course, the legal clinic has been great to provide these town halls. Also a pop-up clinic. Obviously, we can't get into specifics, but talk to me about this week's pop-up clinic and how that went.
Yes, it went well. And again, the Legion has been a great partner in this. They've provided some space so we could do this. And it was well attended, and we were able to answer, tenants' questions one-on-one, because there's a lot of stress around this, because, it's people's homes that they risk losing. The stories that we've heard, some of the people have been in that community for 25 years. Some people have been living there for even longer, or were born in that community. There's a sense of community between the tenants there. And, getting evicted would be pretty terrible for a lot of people. So, we were able to give some advice and some opinions one-on-one.
Absolutely, that's great, because at the end of the day, although certainly your forte is the law and that's your purview, but I think it's pretty clear that if all of these tenants ended up in the rental market, the housing market, that there just would not be enough units there for them.
No, it would be terrible for them and for the rental market also. There's a lot of pressure on the rental market right now, and there's not a lot available, especially the more affordable units are really tough to find, or almost impossible to find right now. So it would be terrible for them, because there's not enough units to cover, their needs. Plus, they would kind of take up units that other people need also right now. So it would be terrible for Cornwall's rental market.
Absolutely. So when we look at the next steps, obviously we know that there are precedents in this terms of thing, even with this particular company. At the end of the day, there's a lot of tenants that unfortunately the legal clinic can't help everybody, but there are options for some of them that do qualify to receive help from the legal clinic. So maybe just some final thoughts on the next steps and how people can get further help.
Yes, so we did the drop-in this week where people could get legal advice one-on-one, and people can also call the legal clinic. You can find us, online or in the phone book, but they can call the legal clinic, and we'll be happy to help everybody that qualifies financially. So we're funded by Legal Aid Ontario, so there's a financial test to see if people qualify. We might, depending on how things unfold, do another town hall where we could invite everyone, independent of their revenue, and to provide more information or updates depending on what's happening. So we've talked to a bunch of people. Anybody else that needs advice, they're welcome to call the clinic, and we'll schedule appointments and provide the assistance that we can.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you, Robert, for doing this, for being here today, but also, again, you and the team at the Legal Clinic for the work that you're doing to help those that really are in a rough patch right now. So thank you once again, and best of luck going forward.
Thank you, and thank you for covering this and sharing the news and the information with the community.